Okay, we're starting off now. This here will be the 1983 racing season year, which this year really I don't have a whole lot for it, so hopefully it'll be a little bit shorter here. But this one here, the picture that you're seeing here is John Gallagher, and I'm putting that up. It's not a picture of me, but this here's John. This here probably was in 1982 actually, but John was a really good friend of mine. Me and him, John was at a young age, come to my parents, be in the race shop, bring his mini bikes up, would ride together. Just a lot of times, a lot of years racing with Johnny and that, traveling, going different races and that. And Johnny also has passed away here just this past year. So a little bit of a tribute to him. Just I'd like to include some of the different ones that were involved, with my racing and that, and also me with their racing years. Which Johnny, unique story with him is one time, younger years, before he ever had his driver's license. He was probably 15 at the time. Actually, in this picture, he's probably only 16. But so he's coming up to my parents, had a practice track there, my grandparents, and his dad's bringing him up. They had an old red, I think it was a Ford pickup. And Johnny was always big on starting his bikes and letting them warm up well before we went out riding. And he lived a good probably 8 miles away. So here his dad's bringing him up, and they pull in, and Johnny's trucks, or his bike is in the back of their truck, strapped down, sitting there back there idling. He'd started it clear at home and left it run the whole way there, coming up there. And he just used to do stuff like that. But actually Johnny went on then years later and pretty successful at racing. And a little later on he gets his pro license, turns pro, does a handful of, quite a few outdoor nationals trying to make the cut. I believe he did Daytona Supercross down there as well. So he's trying to make the cut at a lot of the pro events and that. So he did do that for quite a few years, which I went with him to some. This here's during the period of time I guess I wasn't racing, so I went with him some. And to some arena crosses down in clear down, I forget, Huntington, West Virginia or something down there. But me and Johnny had also, when I was racing, done a lot of travel in, Bud's Creek, a lot of different tracks. I mean, I mentioned some of these in my other things in that, that were quite common that we'd done, but we'd actually ventured out and done a ton of other tracks, got out, that we got to get to over the years. At one point I thought I'd make up just a list of the name, and I know me and Johnny sat before and tried to name all the different tracks that we've been to, and there's a lot, and a lot of them you forgot about in that. But so anyway, this is just a little bit of tribute also to him, will be in this one. So I'll start off now my performance in that in 1983. Again, now I'm back running the B class just for fun, and I take the first race of the year was at Harrisburg at the farm show grounds at the arena cross out there, running 125 B class. There was 156 bikes in that class, which they'd have huge turnouts out there. I mean, it's in the kind of in the middle of the winter, so people come from all over to race that. So you have to do your qualifiers, run the qualifiers and everything to make the main. And I had a 5th place overall then in the main out there on that one there. That was February 19th, Harrisburg Farm Show grounds. Don't know where Johnny finished out there, because I'm sure that was one of the years me and him traveled out there together. So we come back here then March 13th, we do Rocky Ridge. First moto I had a wreck, didn't finish that one. Second moto I won it, got the whole shot and won that one. Then we go to Motordome down in Smithtown, PA. I always remember this one because We had spent the night before in Pittsburgh. It was really super nice night out. It would have been a Saturday night. And we used to go over to the airport on, sometimes in the evenings. We'd stay at Bob Schwartzmiller's house in Pittsburgh. And at that time, you could go over to the airport and you could go right up to the end of the runway. Either end of the runway, because depending on what direction the planes were taking off, they would come racing down the runway right at you. I mean, you're right there at the end of it. And then when they lift off, the engines are under full throttle and you just get a big blast, of air pressure in that back against you. And we used to do that. So I remember going there that night, very nice night out. We get up the next day and it is freezing cold. Now this is end of March and it's a light snow, pouring down rain and freezing cold. So we go down there to Smithtown, PA to the Motor Dome. This was a PA state championship one there. And super muddy, pouring down rain. Most everybody spent the day in the vehicles with the motors running to keep the heat and that going. And we had to go out and race in that mud and rain. And my results that day, I broke something. Would have been on the bike. It wasn't an injury. And I can't really read my writing where I finished at there, but so don't know the results of that. April 3rd then, we go to Malvern, Ohio. This here's Motorsports Trials was the track. Malvern, Ohio, which I take a second and a first overall. Then we go the following weekend back to Malvern. First moto I crash, end up with the third. Second moto I win it, still get the first overall. Back to Rocky Ridge, first moto I take a third, second moto I take a second. So I get a third overall. Not sure what happened there, why I got a third and second, but that was the results. Then we go off April 24th to a track called Limits. I think that was more out, heading out towards State College, PA, somewhere out in there. And I believe I took a first overall out there. And a unique story to go with that is I remember that day I was out there and I come in from practice and there was a kid named Rodney Phillips and his dad was there. His dad comes over to me and my bike's sitting there idling, warming up in that to go out, I think it was practice or one of the motos, and his dad comes over to me and says, "You got a bearing going out in that engine." He said, "I can hear it rolling in there." That's his words to me. He says, "I can hear that bearing rolling in that engine. You got a bearing going out." And I just kind of thought he was kind of whacked out or something. I mean, who in the world can hear a bearing in the engine rolling to know that? Because the bike's sitting there running fine, idling away. And sure enough, shortly after that, the main bearing went out of that engine. So apparently the guy did have a good ear for the engines and hearing things. Okay, so I'm going to move back over now. Not a whole lot more for that year. And that was 83. I don't know if I went and done maybe just a couple, like maybe 3 races in 84 or so, but I know that was kind of my very end of racing for this time period. Because I was getting married in the spring of 85 and the end of 84 bought some land in that, so I was done with my racing in that for now, planning on coming back later, but it wouldn't be until the maybe 1990 before I ever come back, somewhere in there. So I was off from 84 clear up until 90 when I decided to come back. But anyway, I'm going to go cover some photos that we got from that I also remembered I forgot to go through at the end of my 82 season, so I'm going to go back now and just show some of the different photos in that. This here was like a blow up, a larger one. That was the one that was shown before. That's me and Shirley. That would have been on my 81 125. That was me and Shirley on my 82. Give a unique story here to go with. I don't know if this here, I'm going to say it was probably in the 83 racing season. Now, you got a picture at that point in time. I'm not real old. I'm pretty young yet. What, maybe 19 years old. And Shirley's 4 years behind me, so she's 15, maybe 16 at the point in time. So we go to High Point. This here's the weekend of the Pro Nationals. And anyway, we're staying down there, and at that point in time, Bob Hanna, he's one of the national champions. Bob was probably one of the, at that period of time, probably one of the best ever in the sport of motocross. I mean, there was others too, but Bob was known. He was pretty dominant. He would lap, at times he had lapped up to second place and everything. Bob was from out in California. So anyway, we're there at High Point, and after the race is hanging out, and we were over, at that time they still traveled in the box trucks and that. So we're all there. Bob was there. He had just concluded for the end of the day, and we're hanging out over there and by the back of his box truck. And so for whatever reason, I don't know why, but Shirley says to Bob, "Hey, how about like a kiss?" You know, like, because he had won that day, just as a, I guess, a celebration thing. Trophy girls used to do with that. But so just kind of a story. Bob's had a girlfriend also, and so he said he had better decline for that because his girlfriend wouldn't be real happy with that. So, but just a unique story there that went along with that. So this one here was actually, that's Johnny Gallagher on his 125 and my 125 out back at my parents' place, the race shop there we had at the back. Johnny used to come up and spend a lot of time up there, bring his bikes up. We'd all work on the bikes together and that. It's also my 82 125. 82 125. I believe this one here is probably at Yankee Lake. Just some of the race pictures from back then. This here was also at Yankee Lake. That was a sand area somewhere that there was probably my 81 125. So I'm just kind of showing some of the different photos from back then that I forgot to get before. Starting line, I guess that was on the, had a pair of pants back then, and on the back of them I had "moving on." You used to just put either your name or a different statement on the back of your pants, helmets and stuff. So I guess I'll show, I still got those pants. I kept some, I got some of my old racing stuff that I kept as kind of memorabilia from back in the years. So I got a whole cedar chest full of old racing gear in that. But that was them pants that still got them yet today. This is a pair of Griff's pants that I used to have. This is an old Bell Moto 3, but I always liked the duck stay back. That was on the back of one of my helmets in that. I believe Chet did the custom painting of that one. That was actually the yearbook, from high school yearbook, from championship at many years ago. So that's kind of going back in time. And here is another old photo from, I had never seen this photo till years and years later. I was actually looking on, there's a, I think it's somewhere on the internet, I'd seen that, and somebody else had posted this picture. And this here was back from, at Harbor Woods one time, they did a water jump. And basically what it was is, back at the very beginning part, you can hardly see it, they built a really big jump, dug a pond on the other side, filled it full of water, and then they also made a bypass that went out around, but the bypass was a lot slower. If you wanted, you could take the big jump and try and leap that pond to the other side. And there was only a handful of riders there that day that was doing the water jump. I'm going to say maybe half a dozen or so that actually was doing that. I was one. I think Dave Clausen was doing it. Pretty sure he did it. Gary Pistolic. Remember Sam Fody had done it. I would imagine Leland probably did because he was pretty crazy at jumping and that. But anyway, never seen that photo. Seen it years later. Somebody had posted it on the internet. And so that's where I got that picture from. And at first I didn't even remember because I seen the number 10 on there. And at that point in time I forgot that I had even run a number 10. But so that was just a unique photo there. We'll move on to some of these others from more in the around the 83, 82 era. On the start, I believe, yeah, I'm pulling the whole shot on that one there, leading the pack into the corner. There's Shirley. This one here, I remember that picture there, that Shirley at High Point. That was the weekend that me and her went down that I had spoke about when I met up with Ray Somo, racing against him that weekend. That was the weekend right there. I do remember that from that photo. That was at the regional at High Point. Not sure where that's at. These are just a few four-wheeler pictures, three-wheeler pictures. I believe that was Donnie Clark. On the four-wheeler. He rode one of them for a while. Used to race one as well. Johnny Gallagher, pretty dark picture. But that's his bike there in the background. This is Shirley the same weekend. That was when we were pulling out of her parents' house to go to High Point that weekend. I remember when that picture was taken. I guess since getting married was kind of the end of it for the 83, so I'm showing some of the pictures of Shirley from that period of time. There she is. That would be standing. I had a trophy case at my parents' place. My father had built that for me. That was actually some of the trophies from my very early years of racing, and that's her standing by it. Cowboy hat, I think that was come from one of the Harrisburg trips. There's somebody was selling cowboy hats out there, and I believe I got a black cowboy hat, and she always liked it. So then it would have been the I believe the following year back, the same guy was out there had selling these cowboy hats or something. I got her a blue and white one. So I guess while I'm at it, since I'm getting towards the end of that period of time, this here would have been from trail riding. We used to go up to, that I had spoke about. We used to go up to Du Bois. Mainly me, Clay Marsteller, and Butch Marsteller used to go up there fall, different times, go up, spend the weekend at the cabin up there and go trail riding. Tons of trails up there. This here was a hill they called Big Muddy. I mean, it was super big. That super steep. You can't hardly tell it from here, but it just went on and on and on, which I believe the only one of us that ever made it to the top of that was Clay, and that was on a 500. But there's Butch trying to climb it. This here is me and Clay part way up the hill trying to climb it. This one here, it actually looks like we're laying on the ground, but we're trying to show how steep this hill is. It was a hill climb we were doing. And we're actually, me and Clay is over the side of the hill. I'm holding on clipped onto a big rock sticking out of the side to keep from sliding back down the hill. And that's Butch just crisking the top of it. That one wasn't Big Muddy, that was in another strip mine area. But some of these hills were like super steep when we'd just do hill climbing and that. I believe that's me trying to make it up Big Muddy on a 125. That was just the three of us in a strip mine area. Butch. That is Butch there too on his 250. And that's Clay doing Big Muddy. I remember capturing that photo, trying to get right out there, but near get hit by him coming up there. But anyway, I have very few pictures of Butch, and Butch was the one I said that he was a friend of mine, got killed on the street bike. These, I believe, are the only pictures that I have of him. And these just some years later, a few years later, when Shirley was graduating high school and that. The old Chrysler LeBaron. So that's kind of the conclusion then of my younger years of racing, and that would have been 83. And like I said, maybe I done one or two or so at the end of 84. So the next video I'll pick up, but it will not be clear up until, I'm going to say it was probably 1990 is the next time when I finally, I always kept a bike. I believe it was my 83 125 I kept just for trail riding. And I would go out trail riding in that some, but not a whole lot. Once in a while, I'd go over to like Johnny's, to his practice track or something, and ride a little bit over there. But over the next 7-8 years. And it wasn't until about 1990, somewhere in there, prior to that, they had run a USGP at Steel City, which by then Steel City become a national track, holding outdoor nationals there and that. But anyway, they run, this here's a world event. They hold a GP at Steel City. And I'm not sure who the guy was. He rode for Factory Yamaha, but he was a rider from another country, an overseas rider. And he was coming over to race the GP, so Yamaha pulled a bike out of Gibsonia Cycles down near Pittsburgh, close by. And so they didn't have to ship a whole bike over. They just brought his suspension and a few parts like that there. And they pulled the bike out of Gibsonia there, built it up, and he raced it there in the GP. And then Bob ended up with that bike after the GP. And he had it for a few years. And by then my 83 was getting pretty outdated in that, even though I was just trail riding in that. And then I picked that bike up, got it off of Bob. So that was an 87 YZ125. So the GP had to have been in 87 then at Steel City when that bike was run there. But then afterwards I ended up getting that bike, and that became my next bike after that. But I primarily was just kind of using it for trail riding and that. So then I'll pick up the next one in about for the beginning of, say, 1990 and that, when I finally then come back and start to do a little bit of racing. So that will conclude it for this video.